like to talk about recognizing the difference between good and evil, because it's paramount to the well-being of our societies and for the well-being of our children and the future of human race living on this planet, is that we recognize the difference between good and evil so that we can actually make informed choices that are for our best and for our good, rather than reactive choices out of ignorance, really, and out of not knowing. So we responding out of fear, out of a mistaken belief. So it's really about recognizing, ultimately it's the recognition of truth as opposed to illusions. And if you think about evil, the meaning of evil is deception. So it is itself an illusion. You can think of it like, like if you think of God that is all loving and all powerful, then the idea of evil is a deception that this is not true and that there's another God that is more powerful and is hateful, or is powerful and is hateful. So by recognizing that how we think is affecting the very reality that we're living in, because the mind is the instrument of creation. Everything we're perceiving outside ourselves, everything that we're experiencing is actually being done within inside us, inside the mind. All the light we see is being recorded inside the mind and seen inside the mind. Everything we hear is coming to us through our senses and being recorded or translated inside the mind. So thoughts, they do not leave the mind. So to understand how the mind works and that it is actually an instrument of creation and that it is creating our environment, it's creating the physical world that we see. And because we are seeing through a body of extreme limitation, we're not seeing the totality of everything. We're seeing, a very small amount. The eyes see just a fraction of the visual light spectrum, a tiny, tiny fraction of the visual light spectrum, or the known electromagnetic light spectrum. The eyes can see just a tiny fraction, and we can hear just a tiny fraction. So in this, we're not seeing the totality of everything. So we need to come to a way of recognizing the difference between good and evil, so that in this place of not knowing, we can actually learn how to know. We can learn how to recognize the difference between good and evil so that we make good choices that serve us and serve humanity and serve our children, and actually heal the past. And so this actually comes back to the state of the world. We can see that the state of the world is much closer to hell than it is to heaven. I'm not talking about nature, because nature is incredibly beautiful and harmonious and miraculous, no questions about that. But what man is doing is much closer to hell than it is to heaven. And the way man thinks is much closer to evil than it is to good. And even though we think we're thinking or we're doing things out of goodness, when we have lost the recognition of who we are, when we don't know who we are, our ability to judge is greatly reduced, and therefore we make judgments based on false ideas, ultimately about ourselves, but we project those out onto others. So by using evil against each other, we basically create a world which is we experience ourselves in, and we experience suffering. But to use the mind as an instrument of consciousness, which is really, what our Creator does. Our Creator has a mind that we are part of that mind, and thinks certain thoughts, which are loving thoughts and creative thoughts and eternal thoughts. And we are part of the sonship. We are part of that. In a way, we are the light, not the body, but who we are that gives life to this body is the light of the sun, which is the meaning of the Christ, the Son of God, the light of God. But we need to recognize the difference between good and evil, and we can do this very simply by looking at everything and saying, would a loving creator who, our creator is a loving creator, has created in a miraculous world for us, has given us life, has given us everything. The fact that we're not seeing that is not because it's not there, it's just that we're not seeing it. So, if a loving creator, do we think like a loving creator? Do we think like God thinks? Or do we actually think like the devil thinks, like evil thinks? So, just some very clear explanations here of the situation in life of our majority of people's life in the world at the moment, with suffering, confusion, and doubts, and we're suffering the fears of the unknown, fears of viruses outside ourselves, fear of death, fear of governments, fear of authority, fear of vaccinations, fear of not having vaccinations, and all these things. And all of these things can be answered very simply when we start asking pertinent questions. Is this as a loving creator would think, or is this as the devil would think? Now, if you look at the structures in our world, the systems that we have created or made as man and mankind, we've made these systems. Let's look at the governments. Are they completely clear? Are they non-deceptive? Are they completely open? Are they completely transparent? Are they fair? Does that mean everyone is shared equally? Everything is shared equally? Everyone has an equal amount of everything they need, So if that's the case, then we can really clearly say this is coming from, our governments are working, ultimately for the good of us. But if there's deception, if there is violence, if there is any form of hatred, if there is any form of separation, them and us, if there's any kind of using powers like the police or the army to oppose or to control or to imprison or to hurt or to torture, because imprisonment and fines are torture. If there's any of this going on, and if things aren't shared fairly and some people have more than others, are our governments actually good? Or are they thinking insanely and thinking like the devil would think? Because it's very clear to see this in our world at the moment, because everyone in the world has pretty much been affected by this pandemic. So we can't, one country at war can definitely see the insanity of their governments and see the insanity of their systems, but the rest of the world remains unaffected, and so the system doesn't change. But when the whole world is now recognizing that actually our governments are not working for the good of everybody, even though those people in government do feel and do truly believe that they are working for the best, they are deceiving themselves because they're confused, because they haven't recognized the way they think is not how God would think. And if you're not thinking as love would think, you're actually thinking as evil would think, and you're thinking as the devil would think, and you're thinking hatefully, and that leads to war and leads to poverty and strife and suffering and all those things. Whereas thinking lovingly and caringly, like a loving creator would for, a loving mother would for a child, or a loving father would for their child, to think like that is only to bring goodness and to bring abundance and to bring fairness. So it's very important to recognize, make these judgments, not on people. That's what we must be very clear about, not to make judgments on people, because everyone, no matter where they are, even Hitler thought they were doing the best they can, and the best for themselves and for their people. And government officials and policemen and policewomen and the medical industries and all those kind of things, they all think they're doing the best. So it's not to lay judgments on the people, because they are like we are, or I am. They're also the sons and the daughters of a loving creator. If we attack them, we are basically seeing them in hell, and so we experience that hellishness ourselves. But the systems that are, the way they're thinking, that needs to be questioned. Okay, and we can only do that once we stop believing in the insanity and in the evil. Once we stop believing in it, we start to open up a place inside our minds where the truth of being comes in, and the goodness of who we are starts to filter through these dark layers of misperception that's been happening for thousands of years in human society. And so the goodness starts to come back into our minds again, and then the world transforms into a heavenly world. We don't see ourselves suffering like we're seeing ourselves suffering at the moment. The reason we're seeing ourselves suffering is because we've been thinking insanely for a very long time, and this has really hurt us as a race, and it's going to continue hurting us exponentially now, because the population is huge, the world is being affected drastically by it, and so the effects on for our children and their children are going to be quite dire if we do not address these issues now in this time within our societies. So we can look at everything. We can look at the medical industry. Does the medical industry actually serve us? You know, not talking about the people, but is the medical industry actually serving us? Is it healing us? You know, is its goal healing, or is it, you know, if it's money and power and you know, control over anybody, then that's obviously not part of heaven. You know? And if it's not leading to that, and if these parts of the medical environment are not thinking holistically, it's because they're thinking selfishly, and they are trying to attract money and power and all these things to themselves. That is not part of a healthy system. So we can really question that. Is this a medical system that would run in hell, or is this leading us to heaven? Because whatever's been happening in the world over these last few years, not just through the pandemic, but before then, there's been so much doubt around the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry because of the manipulation and the money involved and the politics involved and the unfairness, and the fact that it's just one thing after another, one problem after another, that there's no accountability held for these huge corporations that are basically taking from, you know, the majority and keeping for themselves. This is much to do with the commercial world as well. You know, is this fair? You know, the way we are operating on a commercial level, is it fair that so few have so little, and I mean so few have so much, and so many have so little, and that the many who have so little are the ones that are paying all the taxes, and those that have so much are the ones that don't pay taxes. They sit in their big castles on their islands, you know, with their residency permits in their far-off islands, avoiding taxes, avoiding all these kind of things. You know, even look at taxes. Are taxes evil, or are they part of heaven? You know, are you taxed in heaven, or are you taxed in hell? You know, simple question that can be answered like instantly by anyone. Are you taxed in heaven, or are you taxed in hell? Then there's the answer. Tax is not serving us. You know, it's not being used for what we think it's being used. The majority of our money, or the money that's paid into taxes, remember the taxes are enforced, and if you don't pay your taxes, you will be punished. You will have a justice system and a police force against you, and you will be put in jail, or you will be fined, and both of these things are forms of torture, and they are basically revenge. And this has got nothing to do with justice, and it's got nothing to do with love, and it's got nothing to do with heaven. So, you know, we can look at these systems of government, taxing. Is it hell? Is this done in hell or is this done in heaven? Because, like, everyone wants to do the best, and all the time we are thinking that the best is this, but it's actually that is leading us to hell. Then we are just going to have one problem after another. Nothing's ever going to be resolved because the fundamental problem has not been answered. We can look at our justice system, our legal system. Would we pose in laws like this upon ourselves in heaven? Or do we have laws like this upon ourselves in heaven? Would a loving creator do this to his loving children? Would all these laws be imposed in heaven or in hell? Again, simple question, simple answer. No. A loving creator does not do that. Only a hateful or fearful creator would do that. An insane creator. So we're thinking insanely. This is really ultimately a problem. We are thinking insanely, and we haven't come to recognize. We're actually starting to recognize just how insane our systems are and the way we think. So what I'm trying to kind of share here is the way to undo this is not to fight it, and it's certainly not to attack people, because people are as equal as we are. Even though they're thinking insanely, if you attack them, you literally are attacking God, and you cannot win. You can only fail, and you can only see yourself in hell when you're attacking anybody. And this is why, the police forces and the legal system and the armies and the borders and the nations and the governments, they're all part of an insane idea that is not close to hell. I mean, it's not close to heaven, it's close to hell. And so the way to undo this is not by opposing it, by fighting it, is actually by just recognizing it's insane, and insanity doesn't need to be understood. So you don't even have to try and understand it. You just have to just recognize it's insane, it's a part of hell, and you actually don't want anything to do with it. So, and because it's leading into darkness and it's leading us further into more suffering, we don't want what it offers. No one with the same mind would actually want to suffer what it offers, because it does offer hell. It does offer more suffering, more laws, more regulations, more fines, more taxes, more control, more policing, more drugs to heal the sickness, because the stress and the anxiety and all these things is making us sick, and then more policing to control the rebellion and the criminal. What we call criminals is really just an unfairness in society. Criminals are only doing what they think is best for themselves against an insane society where some people take more than their fair share. So we can undo all of this by recognizing we actually don't want what it offers, and therefore we can stop believing in it. Once you stop believing in it, not only do you open up a space in your mind for other beliefs to come in, and because you've surrendered those insane beliefs, you recognize that they're not serving us, not for our good, and they're not believable actually. You come to a point where you actually realize they're not believable, they're completely insane. And you don't want anything to do with it, So therefore you let go of the beliefs, and that is where the gem is. Because once you stop believing in it, remember the mind is the creative instrument of who we are. Once you stop believing in it, the mind stops manifesting it. Once the mind stops manifesting it, the world around us starts to change, and new things come, new unexpected miracles start to happen. The world becomes beautiful again. The world becomes a place of miracles. The world becomes a place of abundance. We have the technology. We have everything here. We have an incredible world, planet that we're living on. We've got it all, We don't need to be going off to Mars or the moon to set up a colony, We need to be sorting our stuff out. You know, who wants to go and, you know, live on an isolated planet, you know, with no plants, no green, no nothing? You know, you might be able to grow a few in a greenhouse, you know. But the minute there's a hole in the wall, you know, your life is gone. You know, there's all the air's been sucked out. You know, why spend so much energy looking out there when we actually need to be dealing with stuff that's inside us, addressing these fundamental issues? You know? And they really are simply looked at when you start to recognize the difference between good and evil. You know? And again, this is so important, and I cannot say it enough. It is not that people are evil. It is just that we're believing in insane thoughts about ourselves. We're believing in evil thoughts. So do not attack anybody, because everyone has the life and the love of God within them. The minute you attack anybody, you are going to hurt yourself, because you cannot separate you from them. And therefore, if you want to see them in hell, you want to see them in suffering, you want to take revenge out, you know, get revenge for whatever has happened. If you want that, and you basically want to see them in hell, then the results are you will experience hell yourself. You will see yourself in hell. That is the result of the mind, because your mind and their mind is ultimately one mind. You know, this is the other part of this story, is that there is actually only one mind, and it is the mind of God. And if we think like God thinks, we literally see ourselves in heaven, and everything comes to us. The abundance of this world is ours because it was given to us. We don't have to work for a living, work to survive. We don't need to do all the things that we told ourselves, that we taught ourselves through an education system that has been mistaken. You know? All those things we can actually need to be re-looked at and addressed and undone. This is a kind of time of unlearning. Humanity can unlearn all the past mistakes, realize that they were just mistakes. And we can let them all go. And we can begin again from a place of love. You know, we people are incredibly amazing if you just give them the chance to be. Stop attacking them. Stop wanting to see them in hell. You know, we've only got to look at our politics. You know, it's one person attacking another, one party attacking another. There's no unity. There's just two people attacking, or two groups of people attacking. That's not hell. I mean, that is hell. That's not heaven. That doesn't happen in heaven. That happens in hell. You know. So do we keep choosing these systems where we allow these things just to keep happening? Because that is making us suffer. We are suffering our own thoughts. We are suffering our own beliefs. And suffering only happens at the level of thought. Because we only suffer our thoughts. We only suffer our own thoughts. We don't suffer anything else. Because everything is happening inside the mind. Even if we're experiencing suffering on the body, like physical pain, that is still experienced in the mind, you know, and you can see that with, like, at least when you give someone an anesthetic, the mind body is disconnected and the pain is not felt anymore. And at certain levels, the mind falls asleep and the body is completely inert, you know. But the pain is always felt in the mind. So all thoughts, we suffer our thoughts, and if we are thinking insane thoughts or evil thoughts, that is what we're suffering. That is what needs to be undone. That's what needs to be addressed, and you do it by answering pertinent questions and coming to the realizations that lead us to the truth. It might not be the ultimate truth, because we're all at different levels. You know, a child in kindergarten doesn't understand what a quantum physicist understands, but it leads you basically want to know the truth about everything. That's ultimately the one question that you should be having in your mind constantly. What is the truth? I want to know the truth of this. I don't want to know illusions. I don't want to know deceptions. I want to know the truth. I want to know what this is. I don't have to understand it, but I want it answered. I want it answered basically by the sane part of my mind, not the mad part of my mind. And the mad part of the mind is really the meaning of evil, the meaning of the devil, meaning of ego. That's the isolated, tiny, fearful part of the mind that believes it's not connected to the oneness of everything, not connected to God, not connected to anyone else. It's isolated, it's alone, it's limited, it's tiny, tiny, tiny. It's an insignificant, fearful experience where all power is outside. And the thing is with that kind of thinking is that it's always defensive, and it's always attacking, because to the ego or to the devil or to evil, attack is its best defense. And so this is why we have governments that attack, constantly attacking and defending. We have justice systems that are constantly judging and defending. We have nations that are constantly judging and defending. These are all part of an insane, hellish belief that we are not the loving children of a loving creator. Now, that is who we are. The body experience and the worldly experience is something else, but we don't have to create a hell for ourselves all the time we are having this experience. We can create a heaven experience for us, and that is what we can pass on to our children and their children. Another thing we can look at with our governments is that they're always competing with each other. And we think this is good. We think to protect ourselves, we should have one party or one group opposing the other, to question them and to keep a check on them. Make sure that we are not, doing anything wrong. That no one is behaving insanely. But there is kind of a sense to this, but only if you are in hell, basically, because only in hell do you really believe that there is a choice. Because think of this, if there is just good and evil, if there is just good and bad, right and wrong, if there is just love and hate, then who would choose hate over love? Who would choose evil over goodness? Who would choose hell over heaven? No one in their right mind would. Everyone would choose what's good and what is right and what is heaven, what leads to heaven. No one would choose hell. No one would choose suffering or pain. So our problem is really that we think there's a choice. So what we're doing is we're looking at the other person and we're thinking they're bad, and therefore we're right, and therefore we're good. And we're opposing them. We're always opposing them because we're seeing there's a separation. So we're never bringing our minds together to think together. We're always opposing each other in separation because we think apart from each other. And so the one is always seen as the other one as bad, and vice versa. And this is how we are running our systems. And they take huge amounts of effort and huge amounts of energy to keep this system in place. And because it is so disharmonious and so chaotic, that it requires huge amounts of effort. But when things are harmonious, and when things are, because of their unity and their oneness, because they're ultimately the same, then there is no effort. Everything just flows effortlessly. And this is one of the things with our governments and with our systems, is that we have these opposing forces. One believes that they have a choice, always that they're bad and that I'm good, and the other one vice versa. But no one, if you recognize that no one in their right mind would choose evil, would choose hell over heaven. We can see things differently, but only because we are seeing ourselves differently. once we see ourselves the same, we stop seeing things differently. We can actually start to understand each other, because we're literally sharing thoughts then, we're sharing our minds. And this is a part of an awakening process, to realize that by sharing our minds, recognizing our minds are part of one mind, brings us to the realization that we are part of one being, and we are part of one universe, and we are part of one wholeness. And this wholeness is really the meaning of health, and that we are therefore wholesome. And this togetherness is really where salvation is. You know, it's our coming together that is that's gonna save us, because it's our separation from each other, and our, taking more for themselves and leaving everyone else poor, and all this kind of thing that is hurting us. That's the separation. That's not seeing ourselves the same. That's seeing ourselves apart. Now, no one actually, like I say, no one chooses hell. Everyone is ultimately choosing from their level of perception what is good or what is right. But when we have learned insane lessons about ourselves, we literally see insanely and we think insanely. So to recognize that these mistakes are inevitable when we have learned insane lessons about ourselves, we can literally forgive each other, because we can recognize that actually the other person, that other politician, or that other whoever it is, whoever we think has wronged us, they were actually doing the best they thought they could. They were doing the best they can with what they had, or the way they thought. And they might have been thinking insanely, but we don't have to see them in hell. We don't want to have to judge them and punish them. We can actually just forgive them, and then in that forgiveness, we literally are opening up a doorway between the two of us for a unity that is the sameness between us. It's actually the God in you recognizes the God in me, and that is what brings about the power of creation, because creation literally doesn't happen all the time. All the time the mind is separate and in fear. Creation happens in togetherness and in unity and in oneness, when the mind is inspired by love. Now that is really where creation happens. What we're doing in the world as human beings, we're not creating. We're making one thing out of something else, but we're destroying what we had to have something else. This is not creation, this is making. And this is what we do at this level, at this moment. But we are actually created to be creative beings. We actually have a mind that is creative. We are created like our Creator. We're made in the image of our Creator. And we share the mind of the Creator. And so when we connect what's the same in us together, we literally have the power of creation. And this is where the world transforms around us, and we literally see a completely different world, and we're experiencing ourselves in a completely different world. And it's all possible by changing our beliefs. And like I said, you're only going to do that when you start questioning your beliefs, and you actually say, is this belief actually a belief that you would have in hell, or would you have this belief in heaven? And we can look at everything in our world and judge it like this. Not judge it in hatred, but judge it in honesty. The moment we're not being honest, we're being completely dishonest, we're being deceptive. Honesty is a part of heaven. Honesty is a part of truth. Honesty is a part of love. What is deception is really a part of evil, is part of hell, is part of the devil. And secrecy and deception and all this, they're all part of our governments. We can see that so clearly. They're part of the medical industry. They're part of banking industry. They're part of commerce as well. All these shareholders and all these super rich people. Not that they're bad. I'm not saying they're bad, and we don't want to hurt them. But we do want to wake up as a human race, and And our waking up will benefit them as well. So the rich will be benefited as well. And therefore, by that, they will stop. They won't need to find their safety and their value in money or gold or whatever it is. They will actually start to recognize the value and the what is truly valuable is in each other. And then the fairness happens, the justice starts to happen naturally, because that's our natural state of being. We were created innocent, and we still are innocent. The space in between that's happening at the moment, which is complete madness and hellish, that was just part of the illusion, part of the deception. Once we recognize who we are, that basically disappears because it becomes purified. We realize that those beliefs were just insane beliefs, and we actually don't want them, and we do not want to hold on to them, so that we can let them go. We can basically forgive them, which is, the meaning of forgiving is forgiving. Give it away, give all the madness away. It doesn't mean judge it. It doesn't mean it means maybe judge it honestly. We can't actually judge because we can't see everything. We don't know all the facts, so we're judging honestly. Because we're judging honestly when we realize that we can't judge. So we're just looking at something and we're saying, I don't actually know what this is. And I don't need to know what it is, but I do need to see it healed. I do need to see this person and me in heaven. I do not want to see that person or myself in hell. And that is where forgiveness comes in, because it means whatever insane thoughts, whatever crazy thoughts that we were believing in, that we learnt, because we took on a separate mind and a separate body and a separate being, whatever we learnt in this world, we were just mistaken. It doesn't mean anything apart from that. And once we forgive it, because we realize that we do not want to hold on to it anymore, and therefore we don't want those beliefs in our mind, and therefore we can let them go and we can stop believing in them, then the whole world basically transforms around us. And it's all starting at the level of the mind. It's all starting with the level of beliefs and thoughts. So when you think like God, you will experience a world which is more heavenly. If you think like evil or you think like the devil, the world will become a hellish place. And it's clear to see that the world is much more hellish at the moment than it is heavenly. And personally, I do not want to leave a world like that to my daughter or to anyone. To anyone. I don't want to leave a world like that to anyone. I do not wish that upon anyone, and I do not wish it upon myself. So we have to teach ourselves again. Well, not teach ourselves, but unlearn, so that we can be re-taught by a sane part of the mind that we're still connected with, which is the God part of the mind, which is the Christ part of the mind, and allow that mind to infiltrate through these dark veils that we've created around ourselves, these fears, these walls, and allow that part of the mind to infiltrate through these dark veils and bring its wisdom and its truth and reality, our reality to us, so that we become realized. We realize who we are, and we realize what we're part of, and that is a great awakening. That is a huge blessing. That's not a loss. So these are things that have come to me over the years of the meditations that I've been doing, which happen early in the mornings, last anything from 15 minutes to an hour or longer, 2 hours sometimes. But I also find myself, during the day entering into these experiences, because it's really become the highlight of my life, because they are so beautiful, and the messages and the wisdom and the understandings, the self-realization, and how they themselves just kind of wash away all the fears and answer all the questions, and literally transform the world around me, so that my world is beautiful, and everything is given to me. My family, we live in a beautiful place, we live in a beautiful country, so amazing things happen, miracles constantly happening. If miracles aren't happening in your life, then I suggest it's time to start looking deeper inside yourself, because miracles happen naturally. And if they're not happening, it's because you're thinking unnaturally. Miracles are literally a state of being which is given to us because we are created miraculous by a miraculous mind and by a miraculous creator. So it's not something that is unnatural, it's completely natural. And if we're not experiencing miracles in our life and in our world, it's because we're thinking insanely about ourselves. And this is why we need to address these issues around authority, because we've literally given authority away outside of ourselves. We've given it to an outside, an external authority that we believe will somehow save us or protect us. But it's quite clear that this is not the case, and that our governments and our systems that are in place are not making us happy, and they do not give us security, and the banking system does not give us security, and the medical industry do not give us the healing that we want, and the governments do not behave sanely and share evenly and fairly, and the justice system is not fair at all. It's completely insane. And it's because of this and because of the beliefs, we've put our will into these insane beliefs about ourselves. Therefore, miracles do not happen to us, because we're literally putting a wall up and a defense against our true nature. Because our true nature is abundance and is absolute beauty and is love. We are created out of love by a loving creator. We're not created in sin. The body is an experience of sin because it's an experience of separation, of being outside of heaven. And because of that, we have the choice to create heaven or hell. And at the moment we are creating hell for ourselves. And this has been going on for many thousands of years. And it's part of our awakening process, I suppose. But it's necessary to get through this stage and not prolong it. By changing the way we think, we literally change the reality around us. But we can only change the way we think when we start to see ourselves differently. So we have to unlearn all the things that we thought we were and we were told we were. Things like you have to work for a living, you have to work to survive, you have to win, you have to win over everybody else. That the way to have is to take. All of these are part of an insane idea, and this is why people who take more for themselves leave everyone else in poverty. It's part of an evil concept, which is coming from hell. And if you think about it, only in hell is that possible. In heaven, that's just not possible. So do we want to see ourselves as God sees us, or do we want to see ourselves as the devil sees us? I'm not saying there is a devil, but it is a state of mind. And all the time we are thinking like the devil, we are creating hell for ourselves. We are going to experience ourselves in hell. And once we've got through this, we will actually realize, that actually a one world government is good for us. When we stop hating each other and we stop opposing each other, and when we have a government that works with each other, who is there to oppose? Why would you have two governments if there's only one course of goodness? Why would you need a second? The only reason we have more than one government is because everyone is fighting against each other. But if we realize that actually everyone wants the best for each other, and what is good for me is good for you as well, ultimately, we might want to see it in different ways, but that doesn't matter. But a one world government is not an insane idea. A one world money is not an insane idea. It's actually a unifying idea. A one world government is a unifying idea. If it's given to the devil, then for sure, then it's mad to want a one world government if it's given to the devil. But it never will be given to the devil, because the devil doesn't exist. The devil always needs opposition. It always needs to be in conflict. It always needs to be defending itself and attacking. You know? But the Creator, God, you know, doesn't need any defense. Doesn't need to defend itself against anybody or anything. If we think like that, we don't need defenses. We don't need to be attacking. We don't need to be protecting ourselves from others. You know, who would God protect himself from? Himself? You know? What he's made? You know, is that really something he needs to protect himself from? So a one world government is something that is, personally, I think it's something that's going to come, because it will show be part of the healing process of mankind. At the moment, it's feared, because we're judging it on all the other governments that are in place. But the truth is that a one world government, if given to goodness, will serve everybody the same and fairly. But it doesn't mean it has to be the same as the governments that we got in place now. In fact, it must not be that. It must be the opposite of that.